Hello and welcome to episode 120. In a recent episode, we looked at Frederik Pohl and C.M. Kornbluth, who formed the most important science fiction writing team of the 1950s. This instalment looks at a key book by a dominant collaboration of the 1970s and 1980s, Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. These right-wing hard SF authors worked together on numerous books and even collaborated on fantasy at times. Their 1981 novel, Oath of Fealty, is an interesting fusion of their scientific speculations and their unsettling libertarian politics. It's also a prominent work of SF focusing on the theme of arcologies, high-tech, self-contained urban communities cut off from the outside world. Oath of Fealty was published just after Ronald Reagan became President of the United States and reflects the hard-right atmosphere of that time. A few years later it was included, with some misgivings, in David Pringle's book Science Fiction: The 100 Best Novels. This episode gives an overview of this memorable book and its significance in 1980s political SF. Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle made up one of the most fruitful collaborative teams in 1970s and 1980s American SF. Beginning with The Mote in God's Eye in 1974, which was nominated for the Hugo, Locus and Nebula Awards, they delivered a string of successful novels. They were united in their enthusiasm for hard SF approaches and in their staunch right-wing libertarian political views, and worked together over a period of more than 30 years. Oath of Fealty is the fourth Niven-Pournelle collaboration, published initially by the small Fantasia Press in 1981. It's one of the last entries in David Pringle's book Science Fiction: The 100 Best Novels, and James Wallace Harris included it in his list of the defining science fiction novels of the 1980s. A standalone SF novel, Oath of Fealty is a key exploration of the concept of an arcology, an example of the wider keep trope in SF. In near-future California, Los Angeles is in the grip of poverty and crime. A private walled city-state, Todos Santos, or All Saints, is constructed over the ruins of a burned-out part of LA. Oath of Fealty explores the workings of this new kind of community in which residents trade privacy for security. A break-in is the inciting incident for a new conflict between Todos Santos and the city of Los Angeles. Involving ecology activism, betrayal, private security, chemical weapons, and a kind of propaganda war, this struggle will determine whether the walled community can survive. While somewhat dated and suffused with harsh right-wing views that many will find objectionable, Oath of Fealty is a brisk and cleverly constructed take on the future. Oath of Fealty begins when Todos Santos has been established for some years. It's one of several arcologies that have been built in the United States, and the only one considered to be successful. It's a huge, secure facility which combines residences, businesses, and its own largely self-contained infrastructure. It's run by a staff led by the hyper-competent general manager Art Bonner, who's one of very few people with a hugely expensive, high-tech neural implant. This allows him direct real-time access to Millie, the community's central supercomputer. The residents of Todos Santos have entered into a new kind of social contract. The structure is packed with cameras and armed guards, and residents give up virtually all privacy in exchange for security. They have a fierce loyalty to their community and deep faith in their technocratic leaders. They enjoy the benefits of advanced technology. One of the city's specialisms is teleoperation. Todos Santos workers remotely operate heavy machinery on Los Angeles, and one even does so in support of operations on the moon. While residents are fiercely loyal to Todos Santos, it is much less popular in Los Angeles. The arcology is particularly opposed by ecological groups who fear that it will inspire many more arcologies and disrupt a normal way of life. In the novel's opening scene, 3 young people break into the facility and attempt to plant a fake bomb. When the main narrative catches up with this incident, Deputy General Manager Preston Sanders believes the threat to be real and floods an access tunnel with the nerve weapon VX, killing 2 of the intruders. This deadly overreaction drives much of the plot. Sanders' colleagues regard him as a hero, but he is, for a time, guilt-stricken. The management of Todos Santos begins an effort to avoid legal consequences for the killings while managing a number of other issues. These include a visit by a Canadian minister contemplating the construction of his own arcology, the investigations of a struggling LA journalist, and the complex personal lives of the arcology staff. All the while, the future of Todos Santos hangs in the balance. Oath of Fealty is undoubtedly a politically motivated novel. Todos Santos is essentially a dictatorship under constant surveillance, which parasitizes Los Angeles and regards itself as above the law. Much of the story amounts to an extended justification for the deployment of deadly nerve weapons against unarmed teenagers. The novel pioneered what David Pringle called a nasty slogan, which is, "Think of it as evolution in action." This reflects the callous attitude to human life espoused by the arcology management. In many ways, Todos Santos is dystopian, but Niven and Pournelle broadly celebrate it as a desirable vision for the future, threatened by the crime-ridden city of Los Angeles. This kind of analysis survives today in the way conservatives favour overwhelmingly white, gated communities over the diverse hell of cities like San Francisco. However, the novel is somewhat less bluntly didactic than most libertarian SF. The authors at least recognise that many people would find Todos Santos and its murderous separatism to be repellent. For all its objectionable politics, Oath of Fealty is an engaging novel. It's been suggested that Niven and Pournelle modelled it on the works of the best-selling Canadian author Arthur Hailey, who was known for books like Hotel and Airport in the 1960s. This is an SF story in a similar style, panoramic, detailed, and with frequent shifts of perspective. While Niven was perhaps the ideas man in the collaboration, Pournelle was arguably the more careful plotter and keeps things moving. Oath of Fealty is not an immediately likeable novel. Its authors are unnervingly supportive of repression dressed up as freedom and go out of their way to demonise the environmental movement. This was a frequent habit of theirs, and one which has dated very badly. However, this is a well-constructed novel, which does contain some interesting speculations about a gloomy future for urban living, class, and responsibility. Thanks for listening to this episode. You can find more of my writing in text and audio form at my site andyjohnson.xyz. You can also find me on Twitter at andyjohnsonuk, and you can support me at patreon.com/andyjohnson. Catch you next time.